Friday with Jarod. We're going to bring it in on TrueHoop. How's everybody doing?
We are good. How are you doing, Henry?
Well, I'm not as well lit as you are. Look at you got your new lights going. Pretty good.
Got the studio lights going, ready to roll. It's going to get hot in here in about 20 minutes, but it's okay.
What's your lighting game? You have lights?
Who, me?
Yeah.
No, I just have a natural glow.
Yes. You guys remember Ben Weber, who was on the show?
Yes.
My college roommate, who's an actor. He lives in LA, knows a lot about production. He's produced and directed films, whatever. But he texted me the other day, like, I got to buy whatever kind of lights you have because your lighting looks really nice. I'm like, dude, that's the sun. I don't have it. There's not a light on in this room. Like, that's just the sun. And so you can't purchase that. That's not for sale. All right, we're wrapping up Sneaker Week. I love Sneaker Week. I feel like I learned a tremendous amount here. And it's woven a little bit into our 9x90. Judy's got an exciting new game show presentation.
Nice.
Look at that. We're pretty big time here on this show.
Lots of colors.
All right, you ready, Jarod?
I am ready. So loving the fact that we are doing Sneaker Week here. And as we wrap up, Nike has a collection of shoes, SB Dunks, and they are all versions of the Jordan 1 silhouette. It's for the skateboard division, right? SB stands for skateboard. These are the 7-Eleven collabs they were going to release sometime this year. Once the images leaked online, the sneakerhead community went crazy. They were like, those are awful. Nobody wants them. The colors are too crazy. They look like clown shoes. I mean, look, my thing is if I was going to cop or drop them, they'd be a drop for me. No thanks. I don't want to wear those. But it is interesting, though, what Nike does. And you can see that they have another one coming out, a collab with Ben & Jerry's called the Chunky Dunky. See that little play on words there. It's got the cow print, a little ice cream homage. Those are a little bit better. I might wear those, maybe, probably not. But I do wonder, does Nike do this and do? Because I mean, the only way that the sneaker pictures release is because Nike allows them to get released by somebody. What do they then do? Is it like, okay, let's put this stuff out there, see what the market says, and then we'll hide them? Because what happens then is those 7-Elevens, a shoe was obviously made, as you saw. So it's going to get out into the marketplace. That price now is going to skyrocket. Even if you'll never wear it, you'll probably dead stock it. Shout out to Adina and Chad. And it will now cost, I don't know, $1,000, $1,500, $2,000. So it's really interesting what Nike does there. And I see my remaining 5 seconds.
Randy had a great question. We got to get to that later. So I love that Henry came up with the idea of Sneaker Week, even though both of us we're not at all sneakerheads, nothing close to it. And I will confess to a negative privilege to myself that I just dismissed that whole sneaker culture. And yet I pretend to be a coach who's dedicated to helping the Black kids I've coached and the minorities I've coached all over the world. And I was wrong for that. I didn't do it with any kind of malice towards them. It just was off the court, and I wanted to focus on the court and on my players' lives. And that's the part that I missed, because it is a part of their life. It wasn't as much when I coached way back in the day, but for the last 10 years, I've been helping a lot because of my son. And I just didn't pay attention, and I was wrong. And so my favorite part of this week was hearing Adina and Chad and Waz talk about not just Jordan, but what that culture has meant to them and what it continues to mean to them, which is obviously why Jarod just was talking about these latest releases. It is an important part of our culture, not about basketball culture, but about our culture as humans. And as a coach, I'm supposed to be plugged into that. And I clearly wasn't to the level I thought I was, and I'm gonna make some adjustments. I'm not gonna buy those sneakers, but I'm certainly not judging someone who does. I'm just gonna I'm gonna be more mindful of that going forward.
Coach, what size are you? Sneakers?
12, 13, depending.
All
on
right,
the brand.
I'll put a word out to my friends at Jordan Brand. We'll see what comes out.
Oh, this is gonna be good. All right, so I had a little Sneaker Week learning. Wright Thompson wrote a pretty cool story about Michael Jordan that they published a couple days ago. Includes this. Michael turned his own last name into a synonym for greatness. Nike does a lot of research about this. They've got deep data. Right now, Jordan Brand sells more than $3 billion a year of apparel and footwear, mostly to people who never saw him play. The Jumpman logo isn't identified in focus groups as a silhouette of an actual person, even though that person's actual name is often printed right above or below it. The logo has become like golden arches or an apple. Responders say it has come to mean simply excellence. That was Barack Obama's take on Jordan when he introduced him at the Presidential Medal of Freedom ceremony in 2016. When someone is the best, Obama joked, they are called the Michael Jordan of rabbis or the Michael Jordan of outrigger canoeing. So in a way, this is like the word Kleenex, right? It's like the brand is the item. And in a way, that's a huge advantage. That shows your supremacy in branding. But in a way, it's a vulnerability because this guy who's in the video right there, what he's doing right there is the magic, right? That's how he got into the hearts of an older generation, right? If he's not, that logo isn't in the hearts of young people, to me, it's a little bit easier to turf him out, right? Somebody else can get in that spot, right? Like if they're not connecting with Jordan and his personal exploits, like how can he be this validator, this like authenticator of culture, right? To me, like if you're just a logo, if you're just a big company, if you're just a corporate entity, did I go over my time? Oh no, you get what I'm saying.
We got you. So Showtime just released a documentary executive produced by Rich Kleiman and Kevin Durant called Basketball County in the Water. And it is about PG County, Prince George's County in Maryland, which is the county where Kevin Durant is from. Kevin Durant, Victor Oladipo, and a whole host of other really top flight basketball players have come through that area. And the documentary was interesting. It's only about 59 minutes, and I encourage you all to check it out. What I found most fascinating about it was that there were so many different areas to explore in this documentary. And in 59 minutes, they didn't do it enough justice, right? Because you're really just doing 2-minute circle level fly-ins over everything. One of the major points of the doc was when basketball came into the YMCA there in the early days. And two of the famous kids that played basketball there who went on to do other great things were Duke Ellington and Dr. Charles Drew. And it was really amazing because it's like, here's this sport, again, basketball, that unites and combines and brings everyone together. And I really encourage you to check it out. It also talks about the famed DeMatha High School and them stopping Power Memorial, which is a famed school up here in New York City, when they had a player by the name of Lou Alcindor, who you all know, and they stopped his 72 or 73 game winning streak. Really, really fascinating stuff. And I would have loved to see someone do a little bit more with that doc. If you gave it 6 hours or 7 hours, I think it could be really, really good.
Quarantines have changed our viewing habits.
Just real quick, I know the clock's running. That was the famous game where Coach Wooten used the broom to simulate Lou Alcindor, his reach. I was going to talk about terrible 90s defense, but I'm actually going to pivot. Inspired by what you guys have just been saying. I want to do a wrap up on Jordan. I was talking to Henry about this a little bit on the phone yesterday. He is, like all of us, he's a very complex and flawed individual. We know more about his flaws because he's so famous. But it would be wrong of me not to recognize his incredible ability as a fundamental basketball player. It's not, Air Jordan, he even said this in the doc. It stopped being about his energy and athleticism as he aged and became about his mental approach. And he didn't say skill, but that was a big part of it. He became an incredible low post scorer, right? He had every skill in the book. He knew how to create any shot he wanted. He understood how to win. And I think, and I mentioned this to one of our guests during the week, if he doesn't win 6, and by the way, he may not have, like lots of things had to happen for him to win 6. It's not the same. And I'm glad, in a sense, it wasn't just about his style. He fucking won all the time. Again, luck played a part. Coaching played a part. Teammates played a part. But there's no question in that last game, Scottie Pippen didn't do a damn thing. He only was valuable because everyone else sucked, right? Pippen couldn't move. Jordan scored 40-plus points when everyone knew he was going to shoot every time. He deserves the credit as one of the top 2 players of all time and the best winner probably since Russell.
Okay, I'm on his thread. I'm sneakily connecting my second 90 seconds, my first 90 seconds. So if the Jordan brand, Nike brand, I'm suggesting is maybe a little vulnerable. Ben Aronson on Monday said, look, big baller brand would have worked with a different person running it, a different athlete, etc. Then we talked to Matt Powell about it yesterday, and he was like, not so fast. Like, it's very, very difficult to make, cutting edge elite performance shoes, right? I'm just going to assume that he's dead on that, right? Which made me think about, there's an amazing How I Built This episode with the Warby Parker crew. So these dudes ascertained that almost I think these glasses right here are made by Luxottica, which is like this giant monopoly, basically. And they make tons of money. They can charge way more than it costs to produce the glasses just because they have all the brands locked up. That was the exact condition that made Warby Parker possible, because they're like, look, there's just fat in this business. There's just excess profit. We don't have to be perfect. If we can get a good enough glass distributed far enough, we can pay ourselves, right? I think that's exactly what the sneaker industry is, right? Like, maybe it's really hard, but with such a big player controlling such a giant amount of profit, I think someone's going to figure it out. It's ripe for people to try. And Ben's idea was that we would change the market by LeBron, who has a lot of heft, supporting a Nike $15 shoe. And it just struck me like LeBron's about owning. He's about equity, right? Maybe he should be the big baller, right? Maybe LeBron's big baller brand is the one that would take off.
I like that. So sports is obviously something near and dear to all of our hearts, and we want it to come back more than anybody. As we see around the world, the Bundesliga started over last weekend. UFC has been having events here. And what's happening now is that, and it's a great article by Danny Chow in The Atlantic, and it's athletes during the pandemic learning what we've always known, right? That live sports is an act of social imagination. There is a performative, right, and performance art nature to sport. The fan interaction and the crowd in so many ways give the people on the pitch, on the court, on the baseball diamond, on the gridiron, cues in many ways as to what to do next or where their next thing is, right? So much of it is playing to the crowd and getting that hyped up. A baseball player in the article mentioned, so much of it is about the energy they provide. If they don't have it, it's a bunch of guys manufacturing it on their own, right? Think about a basketball team down 15-0. Yes, a lot of things have to go into play with that, but when your home crowd is feeding off that, the players all tell you, whether that helps them make a shot or not, it's probably unlikely, but they feel it. And that too now feels like, damn, that was 5 points, right? It's this emotional and psychological feel that the fans bring to sporting event, that if we do this now, as it looks like, without fans in live settings, I wonder what that is going to look like and how that's going to change. I mean, we've seen concerts and various things now happening all around the world where millions of people tune in, but no one's actually there. So I'm curious what that'll look like.
Let's make a note of that, Henry, discuss after the 9x90, if you don't mind. I'd like
Noted.
Noted. Is that the official noted?
Noted. All right. So Hong Kong China has announced tremendous, powerful, locked people up for multiple years for protesting for freedom, etc. Blah, blah, blah. Daryl Morey saw this come months ago, tweeted about it, and it cost the NBA a fortune. Now it's the only thing, it's kind of, maybe it seems like an old cranky person thing to be like, we should stand for values and American freedoms and such. But this is like the quintessential example of the only thing that's left that we can all rally behind. It's like, people want free speech. Judy just showed that tweet of, this is a Trump supporting senator saying like, of course, we cannot let this stand. The same comes on the left. They're just saying like, yeah, 100%, we can't support the president in this. And meanwhile, the president of the United States of America, a position that traditionally comes with being a global beacon of personal freedoms, right? This is what we stand for, is democracy, free speech, the kind of stuff they're protesting for in Hong Kong. He meets with the owner of the Houston Rockets this week and is like scoffing at the notion that Daryl Morey would keep his job after doing what? After doing a thing that cost the owner of the Rockets money, right? So the values here are 100% like your transaction, your income above all else. Like there's nothing that should get in the way of that. And I just feel like, and the entire NBA, the teams, the players, LeBron, Nike, everybody's falling in line with like, let's just appease China, right? As they do this. I don't know. Do we stand for nothing? Is there nothing that you would stand up for? All right, I'm done.
Okay, last one. So on a similar
I cut in line, David. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
I cut in line.
I'm worried that the NBA who is announcing, I think, any day now, by June 1st, which is coming up, what their new protocols will be to come back. Meanwhile, we're going to have 125,000 dead Americans by the end of the month, by the end of June. And I don't know where it's going to stop as everyone's acting. I'm driving by my area. The beach is fine, but when restaurants are somewhat packed, I heard that mayor in one of the bigger cities in Alabama talk about their ICU beds are full, literally at capacity. In fact, I think he said the whole state is basically there now. And I don't know where the end's coming. I know summer will help to some degree. Harvard released a study yesterday that suggests there will be somewhat of a lower number of transfers because of the weather, but we're still going to have a lot of people dying. I don't know how you go back to playing games when we're losing 2,000 people a day nationally, just nationally. So I think it's fool's gold to think, and that's what I'm telling my players: be ready to play, but also be ready to not play, because Bundesliga, I think I read yesterday, has 4 positives they found after they started playing. That's what I was told last night anyway. I don't know what's going to happen, but I just don't see. I'm an optimistic guy. I'm not optimistic that we're going to be playing in the next 60 days.
And that's the big thing, right? Like, I know, Henry, you talk to people, I'm hearing from people too. A lot of the people in and around the NBA are talking about, looks like mid-July, things are going to start cranking up again. But the question I have is, okay, so you start. Well, what happens if you have one player test or two and a little mini enclosed outbreak happens? You have to shut the whole thing down again, right? So, or are you going to do that? And it doesn't seem like that. A lot of people are saying, no, we're not going to shut down. We're going to keep. I'm like, well, how are you going to police this? What is your mechanism in place here? And that's the question that I have.
So we love Dana Smith on this show, and she's like our go-to expert. And she and I've been talking. She's moving, and she's crazy busy, and so she hasn't been able to join us. But we did some texting. I sent her the article that was Jared Dudley was talking about, like, hey, you're gonna be able to come and go, and blah blah blah. So I was like, can I just get your thoughts on this? And I'm gonna read you. I got her permission to share this, but she's like, wow, hadn't heard about this. If they test them all and keep them together without outside contact, great. But getting everyone to abide by that is dicey. How many people will this involve? All staff? What about families? Will they be allowed in? And if someone does leave the bubble and gets infected, they won't necessarily catch them in time before they infect others. We know you're contagious before you're symptomatic, or you can even be entirely asymptomatic but spread to people who then get very sick. I don't know how quickly after you contract the virus is detectable with a test. So even if they test every day, could they catch it before someone is contagious? This is fascinating. Plus, presumably local staff for running a center, food vendors, etc., will be going home to their families and not be stuck in the bubble. So they'll have outside contact and get the virus and spread it. What about refs, maintenance staff? There are just so many people to keep inside this pseudo village they'd be erecting. My first thought, I mean, I sent her this mostly because I'm like, remember when Adam Silver said we're going to lead with science? Remember when, and he was quoting Bob Iger, who was a guest speaker in the Board of Governors meeting. Bob Iger, who runs Disney. Which will host the goddamn league, right? It has a lot at stake here. Like, I'm going to say it again. Like, I want to hear this is scientifically valid from a scientist. Like, I know Tillman Fertitta has a vote, and I know he's at the White House saying, like, oh, we want that TV revenue. Like, okay, so we know how he's thinking, right? He's not leading with science. But I hope somebody who does know about the science is signing off on whatever program we go with. I haven't seen any evidence of that, but I've
been listening, Henry, to what some of the players have been saying, at least publicly, and then again through conversations. And it's a lot of that stuff is unknown. Okay, players in the bubble, but all of the ancillary people, because as we always talk about, basketball is not just, it's not like when you played youth league and you show up on your team van and that's it. There are hundreds of people that don't play that are part of this machine that makes it go. Are you locking them all up in the bubble too? Clearly not, if they get to go home to their family. So we're not going to have the temperature thermometer and the tester outside of the bubble every time they check them, are we? And if we're not doing that, how can you guarantee that this does not continue to spread?
And like some of the Twitter chatter is basically like, oh, well, if you're high risk, you should stay away. But like basically young people won't die. It's like, first of all, we don't know that, right?
Not true.
What if someone dies is the question. That's from an NBA front office person. It remains like, what if someone dies? Like, is really, we could lose the whole NBA if they shut it down like that, right? And then I was like, okay, so Jared Dudley's a little cavalier about like, oh, we're going to keep LeBron safe. We're going to keep AD away because they're really important. It's like, Lionel Hollins is a 66-year-old assistant coach on that team. Like, I don't know if he's like pre-diabetic or whatever, but like it wouldn't be unusual to think he's in multiple risk categories, right?
Right.
What are we actually saying? Like legally as employers to Lionel Hollins? Are we saying you can't work? Are you saying you're not essential to the Lakers? Are you saying you're effectively retired until further notice? Like, could he sue them for that? Or are we saying, come on in, good luck? Like Jared Dudley needs to go to grocery stores and nightclubs, so we're gonna make your life a lot more likely to end prematurely. Like you can't. Like, how are we answering these questions?
It's not just dying either. It's a novel coronavirus. The novel for a reason. It's called that for a reason. It's a respiratory disease.
Yeah.
These are professional athletes who are desperately valuing their lungs. So they may only be sick for a week. We have no idea now what effects that's going to take down the road.
Yeah.
And these are, as someone who cares about players, we should be thinking about these kinds of things. What risk are we putting them through, knowing that we might be damaging their long? Listen, in football, they don't let you hit people in the head anymore, right? When Daryl Stingley got paralyzed before Jarod's time, and maybe even Henry doesn't know about it, but a very famous player.
Football? What's football?
Yeah, got paralyzed because of a hit over the middle. They changed that by Jack Tatum, Randy's right, the assassin. We made changes to protect our athletes, but now, because we miss sports, I know this isn't the way you guys think, we're going to put them back into play, not really being sure. This is not the flu. We know about the flu. Like, there's nothing new about the flu anymore, okay? So we understand all the risks associated with the flu, not just the players, but all of us. This is different. And to be so cavalier about their health isn't, to me, it's an embarrassment.
I mean, I know, like, Tillman misses his money, right? The players miss some money, and they miss doing what they do for a living. The fans are like, just let them play, because fans always say that. Like, I feel like there's so many constituencies in here that are just not going to stop for the science, right? I feel like it's a freight train now. Like, there's a coalition government building here that's just going to work. There are a million reasons we should bring Bilal in right now, actually, one of which is he's an actual doctor.
Hey, we got a doctor coming next week, too.
Yes, we're doctors all over the place. Judy, can we add Bilal?
I think he's coming in.
Okay.
He wrote on the chat about we shouldn't do anything until we have, we can't do it. Antibodies.
Oh, can't do it.
He wrote that we should be waiting to have antibodies. I love Henry. I just think you nailed it. If we were, you've said this before.
Oh, wait, you guys, look, Bilal had a baby.
That's right. Congrats, Bilal.
Congratulations.
God, that's so great.
Oh, that's amazing.
Congratulations.
That's huge.
And he's still here. That's a dedicated fan right there. He's still coming.
What's her name, Bilal? Can you tell us?
He's very pretty.
Yeah, great.
Very cute.
Wow. It's not Henrietta.
Henrietta.
Randy wrote, please tell us it's Henrietta. That's funny. But Henry, if I was giving editing advice to you, you would say, what the fuck are you doing? But if I'm giving you basketball advice, you may argue with me, but it's going to be with a healthy dose of respect.
Yeah.
This is exactly what you're saying. Can we please let our scientists dictate policy? And doesn't mean we don't challenge them. Of course we do. Doesn't mean we don't recruit other opinions and build a consensus. That's what science would want us to do anyway. What we don't do is listen to rich politicians who we all know where their bread is buttered, so to speak.
Of course.
That's just stupid.
Henry, you might know this, Henry. Okay, so if obviously, let's just say there's no more basketball this year and it doesn't work out. This affects next year and the amount of money in the cap, right? So and how that goes. So what does that mean from a practical application standpoint? Does that mean, okay, the cap was 150, it's now 85, so everybody's contract is getting slashed accordingly based on where we are? Like, how does that work?
I mean, yeah. So like the system as it's written now is that, it's a percentage of basketball related income. This year's BRI is next year's cap number. It's not going to happen that way though, right? Because everybody will be incentivized to just tear up that system and make it different, right? They have to reimagine revenue sharing. They have to reimagine. There'll be teams that will be absurd, right? Like there are a whole bunch of teams where you just couldn't keep your team together. And there won't even necessarily be a mechanism to get rid of those salaries, right? Like they're going to cut Draymond Green or I don't even
right.
So everyone's going to want to change it, which means effectively to me, I maybe I'm being a little extreme here, but I think we're back in CBA negotiations now.
Yeah.
Right. Like this is basically a mini lockout until we figure out a new arrangement.
And the players have, I don't know if you saw this, the succession plan was starting to get in place to look for Michelle Roberts, head of the PA successor. Yes. And they put that on hold. Smart by them, because they don't want to enter into a new CBA without her as their lead negotiator. So I think that's what's going to happen right now.
And I mean, frankly, like they need She did the one CBA that she's done happened quietly and smoothly, and there wasn't a lot of history on it. It's like, it would be a very bad time for an old school stern knockdown drag out fight, right? They like Adam trusts her, they can do whatever, she's pragmatic, she's tough, but like I imagine that they can do a quiet deal, which is what they're gonna need.
Oh yeah, they don't need the bad news from this fighting over money. That's not gonna fly.
Yeah,
now with everyone dying.
Okay, we've lost a major component of our My Losing Season book club conversation with Bilal attending to more important things, but I propose we dip our toe in just a little. If is there anybody else here who is reading My Losing Season who wants to join our book club talk for a second? Anyone?
Bueller.
Wow, I was gonna say that, but I was like, no, Jarod's too young.
No, I'm old. I don't know what you guys are talking about.
All right, I'm gonna read this little section if you don't mind. I found this part of the book, like there's a lot going on here. There's a moment where Pat Conroy's teammate is doing a perfect impression of the coach behind his back with the cigarette and the towel over his shoulder, and they're just losing it. And then someone's like, "Hey, he actually is coming. The coach is actually coming." So they
were getting killed in the game. I think it was halftime. And they were getting murdered. Yeah.
Okay. So when Mel took the last puff of his cigarette and threw it on the floor, I was in control of myself. But when I saw Mel's huge tasseled wingtip on his right foot solemnly crush that cigarette with exquisite thoroughness, I laughed as loudly and as completely and as idiotically and as hysterically as I ever have in my life. Only me. My outbreak was met by the stoical silence of my teammates. Coach Thompson looked at me as though I told him that I cooked and eaten the baby Jesus for breakfast that morning. But I kept laughing, and the more I tried to hold it back, the more the high tide of hysteria poured out of me in guffaws and belly laughs and snorts. Snot oozed from my nose and tears rolled down my cheeks. Then Mel exploded. "Conroy, you think it's funny? You think it's funny that fucking Old Dominion is kicking our asses to hell and back? Losing's funny to you? Losing eats my guts out and makes me want to puke. I'd rather die than be a loser, Conroy. Die. Get the fuck out of this locker room." This is some strong talk for Bilal's baby. "Get out now. I won't have you on my damn team." Laughing still, I staggered out of the locker room, thinking I just ruined my life. When the team returned to the court, I went into the empty locker room, removed my uniform, and showered alone for the first time. The second half started, and I could hear the sound of the basketball hitting the oak floor, one of the loveliest sounds to me. Devastated, I dressed and walked the long way back to the barracks, by the baseball field and the obstacle course and behind the mess hall. In memory, that walk looms colossal in importance. Now I knew the dismayed horror of being the agent of the destruction of my own life. I wondered if Mel would revoke my scholarship tomorrow. In the darkness, I tried to form the words I would use to tell my mother that I'd been kicked off my college basketball team. From bitter past knowledge, I knew my parents would not spend a dime on my college education. From even bitterer knowledge, I thought of my bullying, browbeating father's reaction and thought that in his rage, the great Santini might try to beat me to death. I imagined the fistfight I would have with the strongest Marine colonel I'd ever met, and it surprised me that I was even thinking about fighting back. Then a sudden surge of pure fear shot through me as I realized the Vietnam War was raging in Southeast Asia, and that I'd be drafted the day I told the controller's office I could not pay the tuition for the final semester of my senior year. I could see the headline in the Brigadier on the day my death was announced in the mess hall: "Conroy killed by mortar fire because he laughed at Thompson."
That's amazing. Can I follow that up with another passage?
Oh yeah, it's passage
much smaller. I think this is really the heat of the story. It comes after their last game, and it's written. Mel Thompson's quoted in the News and Courier. "Pat Conroy gave another great performance. That kid gets more mileage out of his talent than any player I have ever coached." So he writes, "Children," this is Pat Conroy writing, "heirs of mine, you may put those words of Mel Thompson's on my tombstone, and I will smile in joy for all eternity. I take those words to the writing desk every day of my life. When I cannot write or find the words cunning in their refusal to present themselves to me or to bend to my will, I read his words again. I say, Mel Thompson, my Ahab, my demanding and melancholy coach, one of the hardest, most authoritarian men I've ever met, the hardest taskmaster, the demon-driven coach of my college days, the dark icon of madness, told the world that I got more mileage out of my talent than any player he has ever coached." He goes on one more paragraph from there. The irony of the book is my losing season was, in a sense, the life-changing year of his life for the better. He learned how to deal with his father. He learned how to deal with the authority figures like his dad and Mel Thompson. Despite all that losing, he found his true game. He became a really good player for them. You don't just score 20 points in a game of college at Division I level and not be good, right? He found his writing voice in a sense. And that's the irony of the name My Losing Season. He only lost those games. He didn't lose at life. He finished at the Citadel. And to me, I love that Henry picked that passage, because that kind of is what changed him. That's when he stopped listening to Mel Thompson after that game, in a sense. And I was thinking about this. Imagine if Mel Thompson had said what he said to that reporter to Pat Conroy. Like, he never said it to his own player ever. Be like, Jarod doesn't have children yet. Henry and I do. We don't want to die not having our kids hear from our voice how we feel about them. That doesn't mean we aren't stern sometimes, or at least I am. And I'm sure Henry has his moments where he's got to be the dad. But Pat Conroy would have even been better. And yet, and this is really the value of the whole thing, he kept his dignity. Pat Conroy kept his dignity despite lots of the opposite all around him, and ended up becoming, obviously, one of the best American writers probably of our time. Our players, and we know this from just been talking to some guys this week, but we all know it from being fans. Our players have gone through so fucking much, right? Henry and I talked about guys like Dwayne Casey and Alvin Gentry, and we think about the movie The Shawshank Redemption, right? Remember that river of shit he had to crawl through? Mm-hmm. There's a lot of players and coaches and executives in our league that have crawled through miles of it. And we don't know what they've gone through. We only think they do, which is why we had to pay attention in the first place. And I think it's one of the missions of Henry and of me now and TrueHoop and Judy. We want to tell those stories, because to only see the success they've had, and this is where I think the Doc Jordan documentary really missed, is we barely got a glimpse of what his life was like growing up, because that so much dictated what he became. And they just glossed over it so quickly. And it's a shame. And I think it's one reason why the baseball experience is so helpful to him, because it reminded him of that river of shit he was climbing through for so long. It helped form who he was. And to me, Conroy will forever. I'm reading this book every year for the rest of my life, With All the President's Men. I read 3 books now. Harvey Penick's Little Red Book, All the President's Men, because it's a reminder of what our government's capable of doing, which is appropriate now, but it's always appropriate, and My Losing Season. I never want to forget that slog, that ability to get through him. The man, he was getting pulverized by his father and then emotionally abused by his coach. And he became one of our most prolific and beautiful writers that the English language has ever had.
Well, it's the idea of, right, the pain and being forced through the fire, right? Like that is how you emerge and become whom you are supposed to be. And I think, Henry, the passage you picked, that details so much, because I remember thinking about that in that, let's say from the time that the teammate is doing the impersonation to the time he gets yelled at, shower to walk back, 15, 25 minutes, somewhere in that range. The depth of emotion he went through in those 15 to 25 minutes is unbelievable. And then looking back on it now, and the ability to write, to articulate what that meant, right? He's like, what if this happens and I die in the Vietnam War? I'm going to get, like, that's incredible. Like, to go through all of those emotions and then say, okay, this is what that means. And here's how I'm now going to, give that back out as to who I am as a person. It's fascinating. And that's what's so great about the book. And I think, to your point, David, about TrueHoop, it's about the human element, right? That's what we really care about. Of course, I was talking to Ethan about this the other day. We love the glossy, of course, but we also love, how'd you get to be glossy, right? What's the stuff that got you there? And for Jordan, it might be for him, and I don't know, maybe that part, I don't think it was bad from they were a relatively middle-class family, but maybe there's too much pain in that part of his life that he can't visit right now, right? And that steely veneer and the armor that we see of the ruthless competitor and all of that, that's just the external wall to build and keep him separated from that very tender pain that he does not want to ever access again, whatever that may be.
I love this conversation. This passage has this part to me where, like, in the making an impression of your coach, right, which is a perfect thing for a teenager to do, right? Like,
We've all done it.
Exactly. Other than the smoking, come on, let's not good for your health. But like, to me, like, this is exactly exactly what you want. This is play, right? This is where kids teach us how to make our lives better, right? And this is B, exactly how to be a kid. This is how kids just, like, this is, you actually need to savor this short life we have on planet Earth, right? This is how to do it. Also playing, there's this little part where when he's in the pit of all of his anxiety here about possibly dying because of what he's just done, he hears the sound of the basketball hitting the floor, and he says it's one of the loveliest sounds to him. Like, he takes a second out of his, like, just dire depression or whatever this is, and just like, oh, it's lovely. I just love that thing. He wants to play.
Mm-hmm.
He wants to play, like, in both ways. He wants to be playful. And this is a fucking sport we talk about here. Like, it would be a natural to be playful. It's a sport. And like, a lot of what's happening here is he let this dude into his heart, this coach. He didn't say he was crazy. He didn't dismiss him. He accepted his validation in the part David talks about, like, as the greatest validation of his life, right? This guy who was completely anti youth and joy and play,
Right.
he let him in, and he accepted that a little bit. And then it took him, how many books? 4 books, I think, maybe, to work it out. That river of shit for him was, he had to climb for like decades to be okay. And maybe he wasn't okay. Like, he was not the most stable guy, right?
No.
But he, like, he let him in, but anyway, to me, like, I think it's a worthy thing to kind of protect this notion of, like, you don't have to be an adult when you're 17 or 18 or 19, right? You can love running around and bouncing the ball and making fun of people, right? Like, it's not a crime. It doesn't even make you bad at basketball. You know what I mean? It doesn't even make you a bad teammate. Like, we just have this psychosis that somehow needs to be squelched. And like, I don't know what it's about, but
it's this. I like the sound of the basketball. It's different for all of us. My office where I am right now, well, if I'm in a different part of my office, I can hear my son when he's dribbling. And there was a time where it just brought me joy to hear it. And then it just brought me stress because he was playing. And if I went out there with him, which he always wants to go out there and rebound for him, I'm not working. And every dad deals with that dilemma. But you don't have to be reminded of it with the sound of a bouncing basketball all the damn time. And I hear it, and I'm like, should I go out there? And then you start wondering, well, does he want some alone time from me? Because normally he would come in and ask.
Right.
And it caused so much stress. And I know I'm going to miss it so much when he's gone. I won't miss the stress, I will tell you that. But I will miss the sound of that ball, knowing that he's out there. And maybe he wants me to go out there, maybe not. That whole thing is something that I thought about. But there's another line maybe Bilal knows. He's writing something now.
Yeah.
Yes. But I want Bilal's help on this because I can't find it. But there's a scene where Conroy, as an adult, is asked to speak. I think it's a Faulkner museum. And he literally sees the desk that he wrote. Was it Absalom that he wrote? The famous book. And he's with the teacher that assigned him from one of his schools. Might have been the Jesuit school his freshman year. Might have been the school in South Carolina. I don't remember. He was with the teacher that assigned him to read that book. And he went over to the teacher who has walked away from the desk and is looking out the window. And Conroy says, hey, Mr. Whatever, like, you assigned me to read that book that he wrote at that desk. And he said, I know, Pat, give me a moment here. And as a teacher, I don't think I've ever done that for one of my students in a classroom, maybe in a gym a little bit. That really had the fact that he knows he helped teach Pat Conroy, one of the most beautiful, brilliant writers. I love that. And there was another line in the Citadel where one of his professors was just so sweet to him. The value of that as a mentor, you need to sometimes be stern, but when you're stern authentically, when you're supposed to be, and then you're puppy dogs and ice cream and direct, like not just say sweet things, but direct to the person, you own their heart, right? And that's what we're all in the business for. If we're coaching or mentoring, we want to build that bridge right in their heart so we can get to them. And that's how you do it. You're authentic with them, but don't be afraid to praise, right? Don't be afraid to praise. And I think, I don't know what Conroy was like, but I would hope that he learned lessons of what not to do, which is great. you prefer not to learn that way, but at least I would guess he was a much more loving person than his father was.
David, you're talking about like how joining Max on the basketball court has this sort of inherent tension.
Yeah.
The contrast to that is in the quarantine, we have set up badminton, which none of us are any good at. And there's
It's
no
fun.
tension. You get to be beyond, like if it's in or out or who wins the point, like nobody cares, right? Like for a while it was like, how high can you hit it? Like, we're like, that is playful, right?
That's fun.
Like it's not a sport, right? It's a game for us, for the Abbotts. For some people, it's a sport. But like that to me is like, that's a fun thing. That's just kind of like
Randy, we care. My wife gets pissed when I smash her. It's a sport.
Yeah, at Randy's house, it's serious.
I invented a game. You've heard of bocce ball, maybe, which is played on grass, as far as I know. But I didn't invent it. My friends and I, years ago, my two brothers and a buddy named Chip, we play it on the beach, where you've got the soft sand, but we also have the hard sand that rolls, and you try to get the P balanced, where if you just miss it a little bit with the bigger balls that score points, it rolls 20 feet away. My wife and I play it now. Since the beach has been open, we go 3 times a week. I have a student in town with a lovely wife, and we go, and he's an NBA player, and he's very, very good, and he's super tall, can throw it a mile, and it's just what Henry's describing. I'm a little bit competitive. My wife's not competitive at all, so it's rare that we can win because my player's wife played college golf on scholarship, so she is a competitor too, and understands touch and roll and reading the green and the wind or whatever. But it's all fun. Like, I don't care if I lose, really. It's so fun, and it's just what we need right now.
It's fun to be new at stuff, right? Like,
yeah.
Like in basketball, you're like, oh, when you pivot that way, that's going to cause you problems in games. You have to decide to bring it up or not, right? Like, oh, we're going to be all right hand today or whatever, right? Like, but in bocce, it's like, whatever, man. Try to get the big ball by the little ball.
Oh, no, when I used to play with my brothers, like, we're aiming, the girls in the bikinis, I mean, we're in our 40s. So you can't hit them because you'll hurt them. But we're trying to play where someone's got a beer set up, and you're trying to get the P close enough to the beer. So there's a little risk because you might knock the beer over, and now the guy wants to fight you. And it's just one of them and 4 of us. We like our odds, but it's fun. It's supposed to be fun. I think I'm going to take my kids out this weekend and play.
A lot of this talk that we're having about dads, sons, families, relationships, we have a great text chat offline here that's good. Coach is always giving therapy and dropping lessons that Adita and I are loving. Henry, you as well. As we talk about Sneaker Week and wrapping up sort of my thoughts on it, there was an interesting interview on The Undefeated with Aaron Dotson, who's a sneaker writer, and Jasmine Jordan, who was Michael Jordan's oldest daughter, the oldest. He has 2 twin girls with his second wife, Yvette. I don't know how old the twins are now, but they're still pretty young, I think.
5 or 6, maybe, something like that?
Yeah, they're super young. And it's so interesting because hearing Jasmine talk about her father in this article, to me, she gives him such a softness that we don't get to see from the player, any of the business stuff. And this isn't the only piece I've read with her talking about him. It's everywhere that she said he always refers to her as Boo. He'll say, "No, Boo, it's okay. This is what you need to do." And it's this very like humanizing version of him, which is so fantastic. And she made him a grandfather for the first time recently. Wow. So I'm so just wondering, like, how much of that is going to help soften this part of him, because so much of it is in that ruthless, maniacal competition. And, as we wrap Sneaker Week, one of the great things I think he's done is give his daughter and his kids a voice inside of his companies, right? Jordan Brand, the Charlotte Hornets, and they're pushing out women's line of sneakers. It's coming out. The Jordan 11s, which is one of the most famous silhouettes, everyone knows those, the patent leathers. There's a women's only launch coming out later this year, and they're all purple. And I just wonder, like much how Kobe in the end of his life until tragically he died, and these are the pictures of them here that Judy put up, he became such an advocate for women's sports and women's basketball, etc. I'm wondering if now the birth of a grandchild, giving his kids this kind of empowerment, seeing that next generation coming up, is that going to be a way in which he, has a different legacy or adds to it off the court? I mean, one of the things that he also does is quietly, he's one of the only owners in the NBA that employs a lot of high-ranking Black executives within not just the Charlotte Hornets, but the president of Jordan Brand, right, is also Black. So I'm just curious as to what family can do to you late in your career. You two were always awesome about talking about your families, and Jordan was always sort of very like, that was never a thing we talked about, but you get these little glimpses, and I wonder how those things will change him as he goes forward.
To draw that, I read that same interview after you sent it to me, and I was like, maybe I'm just way too cynical. But so she works for him now, right? And first of all, I'm like, Jane McManus was so right about like, why did we edit all of his wife and kids out of The Last Dance? What happened? Like, she has only the nicest things to say, as you point out. Like, but somebody was like, nope, she can't have a second of screen time. Like, she's out. Like, what's that about? That's weird, right? That is weird. It's really weird. Okay, secondly, he's gone the whole time, right? Like, she says it, they ask about it in the nicest way, but like, what did it mean when he was there? And she was like, I understood he can be there. But then she goes on a whole big thing about like, my mom was the Rock. She would do everything, right? And then he gave her freaking Bulls colored jewelry. Like, like not about her, right? It's about him.
No sketches for you. You have to wear Jordans.
Yeah. So here's a guy who's never here, doesn't know what she likes, doesn't help with much, and like, and then she's forced to do this little routine of like, oh, he was wonderful. Like, maybe because she works for him, maybe because we journalists insist on it. We're like, how wonderful was he as a father? Please. Like, he must have been great at everything. You know, I know it's true. Like, he might have sucked at it. He might have been the worst dad ever. In fact, there's litany of stories of like a lot of things that would end a marriage and a family that he did, right? Like,
for sure.
In what way was he good in any, like this? He sucked at this. He sucked at it. And now it's decades later. And I don't know, to me, why The Last Dance now? It's like, because his brand is aging, right? Like, he's out of touch. Like, he's an overweight guy in Florida with a drink, right? Like, and he's not relevant anymore, right? So why now? Like, why is he suddenly give a crap about constituencies he's ignored forever? Like, because he needs to, right? Like, his future income depends on it. Like there's a lot of stuff that he needs to sort out that he's just blown off for a long time. Okay, I'll stop now. But like, I interpret it as like, so he's like 50 years late to the game of giving a shit about women. like, welcome, Michael. You're a little behind. You know?
No redemption for Jordan for Henry. He's out.
I haven't seen The Last Dance. Maybe I'll love it. Maybe I'll have a whole different story next week. I don't know. But
no, that's what's so strange is nothing's different. He there's nothing surprising, almost nothing. Certainly nothing overarching that is. And there could have been. I mean, his kids only got 6 seconds of screen time. And again, if they just want to tell the basketball story, so be it. But now we're hearing about Pippen's upset about some things. He trashed Horace Grant, and yet he had no problem. You know, he trashed Horace Grant for talking to Sam Smith. He accused him of that for the Jordan rules. But he admitted as a rookie, he saw all these people doing coke in a room. This is Jordan talking, threw his teammates under the bus. So my thing is, if he wants to build his legacy going forward, run the team better. Because this media would love to see Jordan's team play like Jordan. Imagine if Jordan owned the Warriors when they were the Warriors, right? Imagine the reaction of many, many, many of the writers we have today that covered Jordan back in the day. They would fall all over themselves. Oh, they're just like Jordan. Look how they talk to the refs like Jordan did. And look how he passed the ball like Jordan. So the Charlotte sucks. I actually like their coach. They've got a couple of young players. Graham is very good. PJ Washington looks like he's all right, but I have no faith in the basketball people. Mitch Kupchak, no faith. He's just a buddy of
he's
Jordan.
Still saying, like, and Jordan's still saying now that he could wax his players. That he's better than them.
Which is we got to get out of that mindset.
Like,
I hate that. That's one of my biggest pet peeves when coaches talk about out shooting their players. Like, you had your time, bro.
Right.
Just coach now, please.
How much of that's the wiring, right? Like as an owner.
None of it. You can manage both as human. We all are wired to be certain ways, but as adults, we've got to compartmentalize, don't we, Jarod?
Yeah.
We have to know when to shut our mouth. If my wife's having a tough day, I don't pick the time to say, you know what? I don't love that hairstyle. I may think it. I don't really typically think about her hair, but if I did, I would never say it. Or my daughter, my son. There's a thoughtfulness to being an adult, right? If you want to be like Trump, go be like Trump.
Yeah.
Right? The rest of us need to be thoughtful.
David, Randy has an incredible question for you.
Yeah, when you say that. Yeah. I tell my daughter the one thing I'll never do is lie to her, ever, ever, ever. But I also say, but that doesn't mean I won't change the subject if I'm not ready to tell you the truth. Like, we have to pick our spots. Our receiver has to be ready to receive the information. So there's no reason why Jordan can, and he's not the only one. There's some other coaches too who've acted like they can outplay their players. No player likes hearing that. Like, that isn't encouraging. But as an owner, Charlotte's just cheap. They don't want to spend money.
He'd be better off as an owner to tank and get a bunch of number one picks, but like, he doesn't even want to do that. I don't think he can. Just be terrible. Don't be kind of mediocre. Be awful and get number one picks.
They would have been off for this year if it wasn't for Graham. He was really good.
Yeah, he's really good. He played well.
Shockingly good.
There's like a guy who works for that team told me, I don't know, a couple years ago, basically, like, he's never here.
Yeah.
Like, it's not that Jordan's executing a bad strategy. It's that at that point, he was like having a renaissance as a dad and being a very involved father of those twins. And he's in Florida. He's in Florida, and
teams in Charlotte. Yeah.
He's golfing and he's drinking, and that, he's playing. He's like one of the top ranked, what's it called? The video game that Wright Thompson wrote about him playing.
I haven't read it. I
don't remember in the piece.
The one where you line up the little diamonds and then they Candy Crush. He's literally like a top 10 ranked Candy Crush player. Like,
what?
Oh my God.
Are you
he's drinking and playing. Yes, it's in the story. He's literally like one of the top players in the world.
Oh my God.
Like, he's not running the Bobcats badly. He's not running them.
Right.
Hornets.
Like, it's not that he's running them badly. It's that he's not running them. Right. Like, that's the deal. It's just a
ship with no captain.
Another friend of mine has this thing. He's like, every time it's like we're in Toy Story, the movie, right? And like when Woody, what's the kid's name?
Andy.
When Andy tires of that toy, he just puts it back on the shelf. Like, these, billionaires just don't have to care about what we're doing. Like, if it's fun, they're there. And if it's not fun, they just put it away. Like, this is just a toy you put away, right? Like, it's just not into it. Like, it's never been fun. And so he just kind of mouths off about it now and again, and he doesn't go very often. Like, it's a bummer.
Man.
All right, we got a big weekend, and then next week we don't have sneaker week. We have no theme.
Monday is Memorial Day.
Yep.
So we're not gonna have a show.
Right.
Everyone enjoy. Take a day off.
Social distance. Be safe.
Think warm thoughts of Bilal's baby.
Hold on. Let's answer these last two questions. We have 2 minutes. Read David's, Henry. Oh, he said it to me. I'm sorry. He said, to me, one thing both Jordan and Conroy's stories speak to are opportunities seized and opportunities lost.
Yeah.
Were you surprised at the lack of deep affection, brotherhood expressed by any Bulls teammates to and about Jordan in The Last Dance? No. Not surprised.
Not.
Steve Kerr was very professional and sweet, but no, I think that he ruled it with an iron fist. I think he was better after playing baseball. I've read about this in books than before. But no, I think that he felt like, he said it himself, I'm quoting the man, it was win at all costs. And he felt like being a taskmaster was the best way to win. I don't agree. I think that it'd be even better. They almost lost a bunch of times. They would have been better had he been a little bit more supportive.
Even with Kerr, he said it in the piece, they could have bonded over losing their fathers. That could have been an easy way for them to have this tight connection. And Kerr said it was hard to reach Michael on a human level. And it's like, well, there you go. That's that story.
And then Devin asked if, guys, do you think if LeBron was an owner, would he hire his own people? Henry?
Interesting.
So they did, so LeBron owns a lot of stuff, right? And the earliest days of it was just the inner circle, right? But if you look at these Hollywood investments now, right? These are major producers, major directors, major stars, like they stepped way back, right? Or I guess Maverick learned a lot about how Hollywood really works and plays an active role, but like it's not people who went to high school with LeBron making those movies, right?
This is the point. This is the
So,
point you're making
yeah.
about letting scientists dictate when we return.
Yeah.
Let the experts expert.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
he did do, though, and I'll say he might do with this, when Rich started his own agency as a player agent, Rich basically was an apprentice to LeBron's first agent, Leon Rose, if I'm not mistaken. So he learned the business first, and then
That was LeBron's second agent, by the way.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Aaron Goodwin.
Aaron Goodwin was the first, yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, something good coming from Aaron Goodwin.
Okay.
But yeah, so that's the thing. So he may do that here if he had his own team. Okay, you guys learn from these people who know what they're doing, and then once you know what you're doing, I'll let you run it. It seems like that's what his MO is.
I mean, he probably could be worth a ton more if he'd, like, you know, when he left Aaron Goodwin, he went like 4 years without a big endorsement, as his friends learned how to run that. Right. And basically they never got great at it. They like brought on outside expertise, right? Which is kind of still how it works now, but they did make it work. And now they do have that knowledge, right? So to me, you just gotta respect that, right? Like it says on the wall over here, be the best at getting better, right? Like it's okay to be bad at something, but you know, I don't think Michael Jordan's the best at getting better at running a team, right? Like just, you have to admit if you're bad at it. Like I think he thinks, I think that Jordan will never be good at running the team because I don't think he thinks very much about teams, right? I think he's mostly focused on how to be the best performer, right? Like that's not the Hollywood movie star who becomes a great director, right? That's the one who's just mad that everyone isn't as good as he is, right? I think that's essentially where we leave Jordan, is like, he was freaking amazing and he's super mad everybody else wasn't. Like,
good way to end it.
Good.
That's a good way to end it.
All right, you guys have a great weekend. We'll see you on Tuesday.
Be safe, everyone.
Guys.
Thank you, Gerard. Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, David. Thanks.